Oh, thank you, Kimberly. By the way, I usually don't sound this manly. Uh, I'm grateful. It seems like once a year or so I'll get sick. And I do my very best not to miss class. I'll try to keep my students at arm's length or germ's length. But there's something about sounding a little more like a cross between Boyd K. Packer and Spencer W. Kimball that just adds this it's like you could be teaching anything and people are just. In fact, I remember back in the old days in seminary, I'd start and I'd have a scratchy voice first period, and then my voice would really be dying in second period. And by like fourth period, I'd be whispering because I didn't have anything left. And it was so fun to watch the students like hanging on every word. They were so focused because I was whispering. And I thought I should do this more often, you know? The funny thing is I'd ask them a question and they'd answer it in a whisper in return. I'm like, you don't have to whisper. Uh, but honestly, wild horses couldn't keep me away from this group today. I've been sick since last Thursday. So I'm pushing 9 days, which again is abnormal for me. But I bathed in hand sanitizer and then gargled Clorox and uh, tanked tanked up on ibuprofen and I'm really praying this Spirit will help me get through the next hour with you. I really do wish I had uh, the strength to just stay afterwards. Often in a fireside, I'll have stake leaders say, "Do you need to just leave right after? Should we whisk you away?" And I said, "Oh no, after the fireside is usually more important than the fireside." And often it's that I'll spend more time after the talk than during the talk. Just the worth of souls is great in the sight of God. And for the 8 years I taught in this building, as important as the lessons I gave from this pulpit or other classrooms, the most important lessons I ever gave were one-on-one in my office with people who were struggling. And I really do feel called of God to work with those that are in those kinds of circumstances. Uh, and so again, wild horses couldn't keep me away from you. This is an amazing group. When Kimberly first told me about you over a year ago, I thought, this is a group that nobody wants to be a part of, but everybody's grateful for that it's here. When Paul talked about the fellowship of Christ's sufferings and the chance to be a part of it himself, that's a unique group. And to understand what fellowship in suffering means, I kind of wish that we could just switch seats and have you teach me about the atonement of Jesus Christ. I think the atonement was the chance for him to create a fellowship of suffering and welcome to mortality. It's what we do here. I had to chuckle when the opening hymn was vetoed, by the way. That was gutsy. That was cool. I'm taking it as a veto because the last words I heard from Kimberly's mouth when she was announcing it, and I confirmed this during the hymn, that she had announced that we were going to sing "Though Deepening Trials," and then the veto came and said, "Oh no, we're singing Now Let Us Rejoice." And I thought, I don't know if there's a better encapsulation of what the Lord would say to this and every other audience. That's part of his fellowship of suffering. And that when we want to talk about our trials, the Lord's willing to go there with us, but it's amazing how quickly he says, "Can we sing Now Let Us Rejoice?" And he's the one that makes it possible. So inspired veto. Okay. Yeah. As many of you know, I spent a lot of time with people in faith crisis. When my time in Tennessee that Kimberly referred to, I was a student at the Vanderbilt Divinity School, and to be a part of a liberal Protestant divinity school in the Bible Belt, and not just any part of the Bible Belt. There's a zillion cities in the South that vie for the title Buckle of the Bible Belt, but only one also shares the title Protestant Vatican, and that's Nashville. It's the headquarters of the Southern Baptist Convention, the biggest Protestant denomination in America. Yeah, it's where the United Methodists call home and the Disciples of Christ. It is the Protestant Vatican. And to be the token Latter-day Saint at the Divinity School there was a blast. I loved it. And to be there during the Mitt Romney campaign made it all the more fun. uh, After he lost, my friends were like, "Are you okay that your guy lost?" And they didn't even know that he was my guy. I'm like, we didn't talk politics. They just assumed you're LDS, he's LDS. I said, "Are you sad your guy lost?" And I just laughed. I said, "The last time a Mormon ran for president, they killed him. We're making progress." And so, yeah, from Joseph's campaign in 1844 to Mitt's in 2012, yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. But it was wild because it's the South, so most people want to vote Republican, but it's the Bible Belt, so nobody wants to vote Mormon. So I was constantly asked to go around. I ran the LDS Institute of Religion there, but nobody cared about that. But I was at their divinity school, and so everybody cared about that. And so they're like, "Oh, you're a divinity school student. I guess we can trust you despite your faith. So come to our congregation and do Q&As and explain your faith so that we feel comfortable voting for the Antichrist." And I was amazed at the opportunities that gave me all throughout Middle Tennessee to bear witness of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ, and honestly to answer whatever questions they had. Yeah, it was interesting because I remember the first time the pastor who'd invited me to come called me the week before and he said, "We're a little nervous about your coming." And I said, "You are? You got home court advantage. What are you worried about?" And he said, "Well, we're worried about the laws of hospitality. It is the South after all." And I said, "What do you mean? I like Southern hospitality." I said, "Yeah, we do too, but we're worried that because you're a guest in our congregation, we're going to have to be nice to you." I said, "Oh, and if we have to be nice to you, we're worried that we might not ask you the questions that we otherwise would." And I said, "Oh, I get it now. In that case, let me reassure you that it's all fair game and you can ask anything you want." And I have some students that wanted to come to see how this was going to go. I'm going to uninvite them because I can't vouch for the thickness of their skin. I'll be the only Latter-day Saint there, and it's all on the table. And they took me seriously. It was an intense conversation. I had a lot of those when I was there. But so many of my conversations are with people who have left the church or are thinking of leaving it, that have hard questions. My PhD there was in American religious history, but I studied anti-religious rhetoric. So I study anti-Mormonism and anti-Catholicism and anti-Semitism and anti-Methodism. There's even anti-Shakerism, and there's only like 2 living Shakers left. It's like, just leave them alone, okay? But it's amazing, if you're a person of faith, you typically have the crosshairs on you. And there will be those that are trying to rob you of that faith. And even when it's not a person that's trying to take your faith down, sometimes life itself seems to be bent on that. I was recently asked to speak to the single adults in Utah County, and the 45 to and up single adults, which means every single person there had a story, and they were all hard stories. It's the same with this group. Every one of you has a hard story, a heartbreak, a trial of faith, which is another way of saying a faith crisis, depending on how you navigate it. And as I was speaking with them, and as I was preparing to speak to you, I just kept thinking, if there was ever a group of people that could feel justified in shaking their fist heavenward, or wondering alongside Joseph Smith, "Where art thou? And where's the pavilion that covereth thine hiding place?" If there was any group of people that could feel justified being in faith crisis and wondering where God is in all of this, it's you. And yet you're here. And you're holding on. And you're fighting the fight. You're keeping the faith. And I love you for it. I know the Lord does too. It's amazing what we go through. And it's been ironic for me in the decade or so that I've been working on this, trying to help people one-on-one, because I do it all the time, whether it's emails or Zoom calls or office visits. I've often told people, if you have questions to ask or concerns to raise, or you just need a good pair of shins to kick, I've got two. So come. And we have some hard conversations as people are wrestling with the deepest things of life and wondering if they believe in anything anymore. It's been interesting to me, though, because historically, Institute, and that's what I spent 20 years teaching, Institute was created for college students with the thought that, well, they probably left the farm and they're in the big city now, going to college somewhere. And so they left their support group, and they are getting bombarded with the philosophies of men in college. And so we're going to need to step things up and be there for them. That was the model, I think, that was correct throughout the 20th century. But it's amazing to me, in my years here at the U, working with people in faith crisis, it wasn't the college students. Primarily the ones that came in were the postgraduates who were now young working professionals, and life hadn't gone the way they thought it was going to go. And so it wasn't the philosophies of men. It was the difficulties of life. And wondering, does the plan still work when it didn't seem to pan out the way I was told in young women's and young men's? I don't know if there's a more organized religion on earth than ours. Sometimes when skeptics come and say, oh, I don't believe in organized religion, I said, oh, you don't even know organized religion until you come to our church. Somebody once said, the only thing more organized than the Latter-day Saints is the German army. And they didn't mean that as a compliment. And we have this organization of, you do this when you're 12, and then you do this when you're 14. And we got a program for when you're 16, and then you do this when you're 18, and you got missions with this. And then this is how you get beads and badges, and this is how you get ribbons and bookmarks. And we got a program for everything. And then they go on their missions, and they come home, and it's like, welcome back, endure to the end. And you're there like, what? Is there like a program for that? There's some boxes to check and some things to sign off on. And it's like, well, no, just endure to the end and good luck with it all. And no wonder they get lost, because everything's so perfectly spelled out and structured. And then life hits and you have no idea what's coming your way. And that's when people really start to struggle and wonder if there is a God that has a plan at all. I've learned over and over working with people that usually they'll raise historical questions or doctrinal questions because it's safe. You can keep them at arm's length and hold them out away from you because, well, the church has some explaining to do, or as they say in the South, some splaining to do. And the church has to do that splaining. Yeah, because here's this historical issue or here's this doctrinal issue. I'm not implicated. I have nothing to do with this except my membership in the church. So answer this or I'm out of here. And if you'll just look past the question, there's a questioner that has a whole mass of experience and perception and misperception and information and misinformation. And that's why they're connected to the question at all. Otherwise, it wouldn't matter to them. And so often as I'm trying to, and I'm willing to go down any rabbit hole they want, any historical, any doctrinal, any social, whatever it is, but it's personal at the end of the day. It's personal, and that's why they care about it. That's why they have a dog in the fight. That's why they have skin in the game. That's why it matters to them. And I've learned over and over in working with people to honor the historical question, to recognize the reality of the doctrinal question. But I've said to them often, it's probably not pure history that you're struggling with. Otherwise, you'd be a historian like I am. And you really care that much about history. You're going to lose sleep over a historical issue. And usually they'll admit, okay, there's something deeper than that. Or really, it's just a theological issue. You're a theologian. That's what matters most to you. No, I'm a human being going through human experiences, and it's connected to this historical issue, or it's connected to this doctrinal dilemma. I had a student come in who said, I'm so frustrated with plural marriage. I said, okay, it's been a while since we practiced it. What do you mean? He says, no, I just need you to explain. I said, okay, let's sit down. How do you want to do it? Do we want to talk sociological? You want to do scriptural? You want to do doctrinal? You want historical? What approach do you need? So I would just explain the whole thing. Okay, we'll be here for a while. And we were, and like an hour or so into it, I could see it was going nowhere. And so I finally realized we're just doing this. What about this? And so I asked her, this is a great question. And it's totally deserving of all the time and attention we want to give to it. I'm just wondering why it matters so deeply to you. And I'm not saying that dismissively or confrontationally. I'm just, lots of people know about plural marriage and don't lose sleep over it. You do. Can you help me understand why? And a little sheepishly, she finally admitted, well, I just turned 31 and I'm still not married. 31's a tough birthday in the church because you're no longer a young single adult. They strip you of young at 31. And now I'm a single adult. And now I'm being defined by my singlehood. Like I missed something somewhere. And she said, I just wonder if I meet somebody later in life, will they be a widower? Already sealed in the temple? In which case, what does that mean for me? I said, this isn't historical. This isn't sociological. This is personal. So let's talk about that. And that's when we got to really what mattered to her. And what was interesting in the conversation was just this feeling on her part. How come I'm not married yet? And I've been doing everything I'm supposed to and trying to follow the plan. And my patriarchal blessing says, and this, that, and the other. And why hasn't it happened? So it was interesting to just really honestly and personally and vulnerably say, so the real question is not about past, it's about present and future. It's about, in some way, I asked her this. I said, what if you, so you're 31, happy birthday. What if ever since you were a little girl, growing up in the church, and you went to young women's activities where they made the list of what your husband's going to be like that no one ever measured up to. And in young men's, it's just, I'll take anybody who'll take me. You know, it's just, it's different. You know, it's just different. I get now as a father, I totally get it. When boys come asking for my daughter's hands, man, I'm going to be cleaning the shotgun and I'm going to be going over their lives, you know, vet them and FBI background checks. And when a girl comes that my son wants to, I'll be like, hey, if you'll take him, you can have him. I don't have to sign a disclosure document, do I? I mean, no, I love my sons. But it was interesting to say, if you were a little girl in your entire life, they said 40 is the best age to get married. How would you feel right now? And she kind of smiled and said, I'd probably be fine. I said, so it's expectation. Expectations was killing you. It's that you thought it would be a certain way and it isn't. So let's talk about expectations. Let's talk about how God feels about you. Let's talk about his plan. And it just changed the whole tenor of the conversation. And we can still talk about plural marriage. Don't get me wrong, but is that really the issue? And it wasn't for her. It's interesting because in almost every conversation I have, and those of you who've listened to my podcast probably have heard this before, but in almost every single conversation I have with somebody in faith crisis, I'll explain the stages of faith, which are basically creation, fall, atonement. There's all kinds of scholarly literature out there that have tried to figure out from a cognitive development standpoint, what are the stages of cognitive growth, psychology-wise. Jean Piaget did an amazing study in the early 20th century, and then Lawrence Kohlberg took that and said, well, let's make this into moral development, and are there stages of how people, why they do certain things, and is there a hierarchy of motive? And then in the early 80s, James Fowler took all of that study and took it to faith and said, are there stages of faith? And is there a certain way that you approach faith from a child perspective versus a young adult versus an older adult and so on? And as I was wrestling with all of this, trying to see a trajectory of a life of faith, including a life of loss of faith and a return to faith, that's what I do academically. And so I was trying to make sense of it all and seeing all these different models, but trying to, is there like a big picture here that they all fit in with? And the Spirit was so kind because he basically said, Jared, don't overcomplicate things. This is really simple. And every Latter-day Saint already knows this. It's just creation, fall, atonement. It's just the pillars of eternity. That's the plan of salvation. Pre-mortality, there's creation. We're with God. Everything's good. You come to earth, it's rough. There's your fall stage. Come back to God. There's your atonement. Think about the ancient Israelites. They're in Canaan with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. There's their creation stage. They get off captivity in Egypt. There's their fall stage. But then they return to the promised land in Joshua's day. There's their atonement stage. And over, I just started seeing it everywhere. Every book you read, every movie you watch, the story arc is creation, fall, atonement. Elder and Sister Hafan's great book about faith loss talks about simplicity and complexity and simplicity on the other side of complexity. And that's just creation, fall, atonement also. In Fowler's original stages of faith, this is stage 3, 4, and 5. Because 1 and 2, everybody goes through, and 6, nobody goes through unless you're like Jesus or Buddha. And so we're all wrestling with these stages of 3, 4, 5, which is creation, fall, atonement. That's the simplified version. And I realized that life itself always follows that pattern. In fact, it usually follows it over and over and over and over, depending on what aspect of life we're talking about. Parents, have you seen creation, fall, atonement with your kids? You remember the creation stage when you were a young parent, your kids looked up to you and you were perfect? Yeah, all it took was a mother's kiss and every boo-boo went away. My mom is smarter than your mom and my dad can beat up your dad. Remember those days? It's like, as a young father, man, I walked on water to my kids. Anyone been through the fall stage of their parenting? Okay, the laughter lets me know. And your kids look at you like, you're idiots. You have no idea what you're doing. And sadly, they're kind of right. But they don't want to listen to us. They don't want to take our advice. At one point in my life, during the fall stage, my son was so mad at me. He was livid and he's like screaming, I hate you. I hate your guts. I'm like, okay, I think I said that to my dad. I guess I'm at that stage. It's fine. Then it like escalated and went beyond that. And he was just like, get out of my room. Get out of my life. I hate you. So I walked out into the hallway and just sat on the floor as he slammed the door behind me. I just wanted to listen to make sure he was okay in there. And it kept elevating. So mad. It's like, you're the worst person in the whole world. Wow, okay. Now then he's like, you're the devil. I thought, wow, at least we're getting religious now. That's my wheelhouse. This is good. So then I went from the devil to, you're the king of hell. I was like, wow, I didn't know it was a kingdom. Is that, do I outrank the devil? Is he like, I don't know how that works. The prince of darkness, I'm the king of hell. That's okay. It started to quiet down. I thought he was like calming, but no, he was drawing, because then he slipped a piece of paper underneath the door out to me. And it was a drawing with the devil on one side and me on the other. And there's a striking resemblance. Okay. If you don't know what the Prince of Darkness looks like, here you go. There was the fall stage. Okay. It was intense. And yet there's anyone lived long enough to make it to the atonement stage of their parenting, where the kids, usually it often happens when they get married or when they have kids of their own, especially, it's like, oh, sweet revenge, baby. No. But often they'll say, Mom, Dad, I was worried about you. You were just so lost just a few years ago. And yet I'm amazed at what quick learners you are, because just in a few years, you've learned so much. I'd love to have some of your wisdom. And you just smile and think, yes, creation, fall, atonement. The return missionaries in the audience? Does your mission follow a creation, fall, atonement arc? I love the creation stage of my mission. I was like playing missionary. I'd finally grown a foot or two. They gave me a tag to wear, and I was like, "This is so fun." And I'm at the end. I'm opening my call, and everybody thinks it's the coolest thing in the world. And I give this talk at church, and everybody comes, and like strangers give me money. I mean, this is amazing. Being a missionary is the best thing ever. You go to the MTC, and it's all you can eat Lucky Charms, and it's like this is glorious. You practice the discussions on your companion, and they join the church every single time, right? And then you go out in the mission field, and it's so hard. I remember my favorite day as a greenie was August 1st. And people ask, "Oh, is that your first baptism?" I'm like, "No, I got to the mission field in July." And so August 1st was the first day I could move the calendar page. And I finally had proof that time had actually passed. I talked to a guy that had been out for 6 months, and I'm like, "Hey, how's your mission going?" He's like, "Oh, I love it." And honestly, I sat there going, he's lying to it. He's straight up lying to my face. And I hope I don't have to do that. Does the mission president like sit you down after a while and say, "You tell the greenies you'd love it. I don't care if you don't." Okay. It was brutal until I got through the fall and made it onto the atonement. The hard part is the fall is usually where we pull the plug. It's when marriage goes through creation, fall, atonement. Your education, I work with college kids, and every time they change their major, it's because they hit the fall and they want to start over with a new creation until they hit that fall. And then it's like one of these days you gotta keep going. Right? Midlife crisis, there's the fall. Over and over in life, that's the story arc that we'll navigate. And we have to know. I remember teaching this once to a group, and this student afterwards just came up and said, "I finally know where I am." It's definitely east of Eden. It's hard. The way I view the church, my wrestles with God, I'm definitely in the fall stage. But even just knowing that gave her hope, especially belonging to a church, the only one of which I know, where we have a doctrine of the fortunate fall. And that way, it's not just downward, that's the bad news, but it's forwards, and that's the good news. Now, I've sometimes worried, because I've taught creation, fall, atonement to a lot of people. And when it comes to faith crisis, they'll often think, "Oh, so is the fall always intellectual? I read something, I heard something, there was a podcast, there was something, some piece of information." Because in the creation stage of the gospel, everything's perfect, right? It's black and white, but you're always on the white side, and it's the pioneers saying, come, ye saints," the whole way across the plains. And it was like, "Oh no, you carried me across the last river. Let me carry you across this one." And it's like, have you ever been on trek? I mean, come on. It's messier than that. Okay. And when you hit that messy stage of church history and you realize it, it's like, whoa. And that's people leave the church in fall stage. Because they remember creation stage, and sometimes they're nostalgic for it, but then often they get bitter about it, and they're thinking, "Why didn't they tell me the whole story when I was in creation? Because this stinks." I had lunch with an ex-Mormon anti-Mormon. I had done a fireside that I guess was helpful enough that ex-Latter-day Saints that attacked the church decided to attack that fireside. And so they kind of did a play-by-play color commentary of the fireside to try to pick it apart, and just ended up mischaracterizing me and saying all kinds of things. It's fun to see that 20,000 people have watched you get skewered online, and then to read the comments is even funner, where you get sworn at and all kinds of things when people don't even know you. And I realized, okay, they don't know me, and I don't know them personally. That needs to change. And so I reached out and said, "Hey, I think we'd like each other if we knew each other. At least we'd understand each other. You want to go to lunch?" And they're like, "Okay." We had a great conversation to understand one another. And where are you coming from? And when did you decide you didn't believe in the church? And when did God become a casualty? And when did Jesus become a casualty? And when did you decide to go on the offensive? And why did you choose your particular rhetorical approach? And it was a fascinating conversation. And to say to them near the end, "I'm a little envious of you," because it's easy to move the masses from creation to fall. It's easy to grow around and crack eggshells by the dozen in hopes of freeing the chicks. You just give them some information they're not ready for, or some misinformation, or some decontextualized history, and they're freaking out. Especially as you're trying to claim that you're freeing them from the claustrophobia of the egg. So I'm not trying to keep them in the egg either, but I'm not going around cracking eggshells, because that kills the chick. It doesn't save them. They never develop the wing strength to survive outside the shell unless they push their way out. They'll know when creation stage is too confining. But it has to be natural growth. It has to be one-on-one. And so that's what frustrates me, is you've moved the masses from creation to fall, but then you've left the mess for people like me to help people go from fall to atonement. And that can only be done one by one by one. That's why it takes so long. You cannot, I said to this person, you get to be effective and efficient. I have to pick one or the other. And I'll take effective, even if it'll never be efficient. But it has to be natural growth. It has to be one-on-one. The interesting thing about all this is, once you understand, though, where you are in the process, and okay, I'm in the fall, and it doesn't have to be simply intellectual. It's not just something I read. It's not just something I watched. Some people wonder, wait, so to get to the atonement stage, I have to like almost leave the church? I have to struggle with my testimony? I have to read something or see something that makes me question everything I've been raised with? I said, no, because there's different, it's always the creation, fall, atonement story arc, but there's different genres, if you will. For some, it's intellectual. For others, it's experiential. And haven't you ever met, tell me about your grandma or your grandpa, where there's just a wisdom that goes so far beyond book learning intellectualism, because they've been through life with its roller coaster, its ups and downs, and they have been deepened and stretched, and they realize that simplicity doesn't do justice to actual life. They've been through a fall, not of faith, but a fall of the naivete that they entered things, realizing life's way messier than I thought. Life's harder. You go through difficult things, gut-wrenching, heartbreaking experiences, and God gets you through it, and he's there to get you to the other side. I'll take that creation, fall, atonement story arc, because the wisdom that comes from that experience on the other side is a superpower that you can use to help other people navigate the same kinds of things. When it comes to intellectual things, there's so much bitterness and hatred between creation and fall stages. Because creation looks down their nose at fall and says, where's your faith? And fall looks back at creation and says, where's your brain? And they can't stand each other. Maybe you know some people like that. Okay? They each have a leg to stand on as far as their sense of superiority is concerned. And I had a student once ask, say, how do you know when you get to the atonement stage? And I said, well, among other things, you're less of a jerk. Because you've been through stuff and you see the value of both sides and the negatives of both sides and the difficulties of the whole process. And there's empathy there, and there's understanding, and there's patience, and there's charity, and there's faith. And same with the experiential. You're not shaking your fist heavenward anymore. You've come to trust God because you've come to know him. Now, here's the interesting thing about this particular group and all that you've been through. Because when I looked at your program, and earlier when Kimberly was talking to me about this and told me your title, I didn't sign up for this. And I confess, my original reaction was, what are you talking about? We signed up for all of this. Maybe not the specific trial, but a life full of trials that would bring us to our knees and introduce us to God and get us through a fall that would stretch us and increase the capacity for us to receive grace to climb to atonement. That's exactly what we signed up for. And so I go back to that young woman that was asking about plural marriage and realizing expectation is what kills us. And when we think Because in premortality, the plan was presented. There is space there. We will go down and make an earth whereon these may dwell. You understand creation? There's going to be agency, which means there will be a fall. And this separation from us so that you can decide for yourself and become someone that acts rather than simply being acted upon. We knew there'd be a fall. And yet here is Jesus Christ. Whom shall I send? Here am I, send me. The Lamb without blemish, prepared from before the foundation of the world, as Peter says. So we knew there'd be an atonement. We knew there'd be a path from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil to the tree of life. It wouldn't be the shortcut, easy way, because cherubim and the flaming sword would see to that. But it would be the long way around through a fallen world with all of its difficulties and trials and growth and opportunities to become like God, so that when we come to the tree, we actually appreciate the taste of the fruit. It's still there, but you got to take the long way around. We knew that and we signed up for it. The book of Job says we shouted for joy. And then Elder Maxwell jokes, yeah, and then we came to earth and started wondering what all the shouting was about. It was so much better in theory than in fact, like most things in life, right? My mission was better in theory. And then I got there. I went through the fall, but in the atonement stage, I realized it actually is better, in fact. I just didn't know it. You understand? So here's something to wrestle with. Did you know what the fall would be? Again, in premortality, there's going to be pain. Okay, there's going to be pain, physical pain. And we're up there as spirits. We're like, what does that even mean? I don't know. Okay, sign me up for it. Okay. So much of the unknown because it was the unexperienced. And then we come. I remember when we moved from Texas to California, I was in 4th grade. My parents sold us on the move by telling us we'd have a swimming pool in the backyard like everybody else in Los Angeles, and we'd be close to Magic Mountain, the amusement park. I'm like, sign me up. Who cares about my friends? And we moved. They also told me we were going to have a 2-story house, which was kind of shocking to me. And they said, your bedroom, you and your brothers, are going to be upstairs. And it has a slanted ceiling. I'd never seen one of those before. I was like, really? And I thought, slanted ceiling. So I pictured you start at like 8 foot and it slopes upward. And I'm like, it's going to be like these cathedral vaulted ceilings. I can jump on my bed as high as I want. As a little 9-year-old, I was so excited about that. Well, we got to California and we drove from Texas. We got to California in the middle of the night. And there were you don't turn a light switch on, and there's no overhead lighting. I don't know if that's earthquake issues or whatever, but you had to plug in lamps. It's the only way lights were going to turn on. And we got there in the dead of night. It was pitch black in the house, but I was dead set on seeing my bedroom. I wanted to see how high the ceiling was. That was the only thing that mattered to my little 9-year-old mind. So they kind of told me the floor plan of the house. We came in, rushed upstairs, got to the bedroom, pitch black in there. And I just pictured the towering ceiling above me and wanted to see if I jumped as high as I could. I wonder if I could reach it. So I went to the side of the room. I later did high jump in high school. So I had some hops, and little 9-year-old, I was ready, like, okay, 1, 2. And I was just going to launch up and then reach my hand out and try to just see if I could touch anything in the immensity of space. Well, it was a sloped ceiling. It didn't slope up from normal. It sloped down from normal. And I happened to be on the short side of the room. The ceiling was literally right here. And all I had to do was put my hand, okay, it goes like that. Oh, okay, not quite what I pictured. No idea. And so with reckless, oblivious ignorance masquerading as bliss. 1, 2, and I launched off the floor and immediately smashed my head against the ceiling, crumpled down on the floor amidst the shards of whatever that popcorn ceiling stuff is, and cursed my bedroom the first time I ever walked into it. The next day when the sun came out and I saw it, a little dent there shaped like my cranium, I thought, that's not what I had expected. And honestly, when we were told about the plan and you get to go to Earth and here's this creation and you'll live your life and you'll become like us and you'll come home and man, we jumped in with no real clue how low the ceiling would be. It makes things hard. We sometimes wonder, we ask, we question. But you know what's interesting? God did tell us it would be rough. And if I could just throw a handful of verses at you to wrestle with. It's interesting in Joseph Smith Matthew when Joseph Smith is doing the JST of Matthew 24. Matthew 24 is Signs of the Times Central. It's where Jesus is giving the Olivet Discourse during his final week, and he's telling them what the last days will look like before his return. All kinds of wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes in diverse places and famines and pestilence and plague and all this kind of stuff. He keeps repeating that the very elect according to the covenant will face deception and false teachers and false Christs and false prophets. And deception is the one that comes up more frequently than any other, which to me is striking. To me, the defining sign of the times is that some among the elect according to the covenant will be deceived. So when I see people leaving the church, as hard as that is, logically, I think that's right on schedule. Because there's this interesting verse, I think it's the shortest verse in Joseph Smith Matthew, where the Lord simply says, behold, I have told you before. In other words, I need you to know this in advance because things are going to get crazy in the last days. People are going to leave the church to the point that you're going to start questioning your own faith. What do they know that I don't know? And why am I sticking around when nobody else seems to? And you need to know in advance that I'm telling you this in advance. That way, when you see it actually fulfilled, instead of shaking your faith, it actually serves to confirm it. Because I gave you the heads up. He did the exact same thing at the Last Supper, by the way, when he said, one of you is going to betray me tonight. And I tell you this before, that ye may know that I am he. Jesus prophesied all the time, but to call attention to the fact he was prophesying, that's interesting to me. There's this sense of, I'm telling you something in advance, and I'm calling attention to the fact I'm telling you about this. So when it comes, because again, think about it. You're in the dark shadows of Gethsemane, and one of your own comes and betrays you with a kiss. Can you picture the other apostles who were struggling with doubts of their own that night? Read the JST of the account. And here comes Judas. And you picture, wait a minute, Jesus didn't see this coming? He got blindsided by somebody he actually chose. Can he really be the Messiah? I'm telling you this before so that you'll know that I wasn't blindsided, that I saw this coming, so that instead of it shaking your faith, it will confirm your faith. You have to be ready for this. I'm predicting, I'm prophesying. Hold on to it. He did the same thing about the crucifixion. It's supposed to be this way, even though it looks crazy and things that are going wrong. Hold steady. I'm telling you in advance. Now, to me, so you see a pattern here. There's at least 3 examples of that I've given you already. The 4th one I'll give you blows me away because it comes in section 103 of the Doctrine and Covenants when this is one of the Zion's Camp revelations, where the saints have gone to Zion or went to Missouri to establish Zion, and then they end up with driven out of the county and then eventually out of the state. This is some rough stuff. Now, it's going to get worse before it gets better. But in section 103, the Lord says this to them, for after much tribulation cometh the blessing. You're like, yeah, thanks a lot. But actually, that's not the full verse. Here's the full verse. He interrupts himself because he's quoting himself and he wants to call attention to the fact that he's quoting something he'd already said before. So section 103, verse 12, for after much tribulation, as I have said unto you in a former commandment, cometh the blessing. He didn't even finish. He took the sentence apart. It's a short sentence, but he split it in the middle so he could give the reminder right in the middle before they could lose track of what he was talking about. I already told you that blessings would come after tribulation. Now, what's interesting, when did he do that? What revelation is he quoting? Well, you look for it, and this is section 58. And section 58 is fascinating because it's really the first revelation that comes in Zion. Joseph Smith has finally arrived in Independence, and this is the welcome wagon revelation. This is roll out the red carpet. Here's the welcome mat. And how's this for an introduction to the life you're going to live here in the one spot that God puts a pin in the map and says, here's where New Jerusalem's going to be. Hearken, O ye elders of my church, and give ear to my word, and learn of me what I will concerning you, and also concerning this land unto which I have sent you. They're like, ooh, I'm so excited. Bring it on. Okay, this is God's initial introduction to life in paradise. For verily I say unto you, blessed is he that keepeth my commandments. Okay, obedience is going to be important. Makes sense. Whether in life or in death. You're like, oh, wait, excuse me, what? Do we get to pick which one of those? No, just. So keep the commandments, whether you live, whether you die. And he that is faithful in tribulation, the reward of the same is greater in the kingdom of heaven. Ye cannot behold with your natural eyes for the present time the design of your God concerning those things which shall come hereafter, and the glory which shall follow after much tribulation. For after much tribulation cometh the blessings. Wherefore the day cometh that ye shall be crowned with much glory. Wait. I thought you said glory didn't come until after tribulation. And you're promising us glory? Yeah, much glory. Oh, no. So he says, wherefore the day cometh that ye shall be crowned with much glory. The hour is not yet, but is nigh at hand. And then notice what he says. Remember this, which I tell you before, that you may lay it to heart and receive that which is to follow. The Lord saw it a mile away and told them on their first day. Can you imagine stepping into the mission field? The mission president comes to pick you up at the airport, drives you to the mission home, sits you down and says, this is the best mission on earth. And if you survive it, you will have memories. And you're like, wait, what did you just say? It's like, yep. Seriously, the survivors, they have such good stories to tell. And the ones that we bury here, glory is theirs in heaven. And you're like, what did I sign up for? They didn't tell me about this in the MTC. It's like, well, that was creation stage. Welcome to the fall. This is where things get real. But from the very first day, buckle up. It's going to be a ride. And that way, when it happens, because here's Zion Scamp coming in, how could we get driven out of Zion when God said, that's the place we're going to build it? And I already told you years ago, it was going to be this way. There's a fascinating verse in 1 Peter where he says, beloved, and you got to keep that word there because the feeling that you're not loved because of what you're going through and where is God in all of this and why has he forgotten me? And no, beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened unto you. But rejoice inasmuch as ye are partakers of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory shall be revealed, ye may be glad also with exceeding joy. That's 1 Peter 4, verse 12 and 13. And I love Peter for that. Beloved, you haven't been forgotten. You haven't been cast off. God loves you. Probably one of the reasons why he's letting you go through hard things. Because he trusts that you can make it. He's trying to introduce himself to you through the extremities of life. He's humbling us to our knees. This is Peter leading the church through some intense anti-Christian persecution. This is Peter, who's going to face his own fiery trial and a crucifixion upside down. And he's not surprised by it. He didn't think it was strange. He didn't say, this isn't what I signed up for. He said, this is what I said I'd come to do. What does Jesus do for Peter in the last couple verses of John? Where he says, Peter, when you were little, you got to dress yourself and go wherever you wanted. But the day will come when somebody else dresses you and takes you to a place you never wanted to go. And then John includes this cryptic explanation. And thus Jesus said concerning the death whereby Peter would glorify Christ. They're going to dress you with a cross. And they're going to take you to the grave. And then Jesus looks at Peter and says, follow me. And Peter does. And along the way, he's telling fellow saints and fellow sufferers, don't be surprised. It's not strange. In some ways, once you make that painful paradigm shift, what should surprise us are good days. It's like, wow. You see, I think sometimes, picture premortality, where there were two, we kind of coming into this big meeting, right? And there were like pamphlets outside the door. And there were two of them. And one was a pamphlet for the day spa. And the other pamphlet was for the gym. And we happened to pick up the day spa pamphlet. And we didn't really pay attention that like, oh, no, that only is after you go to the gym. Okay, there's an order here. And we skipped the gym and we picked up the pamphlet and we come in, we're sort of paying attention in the big auditorium, but not really. We're just looking at stuff like, wow, why do they put cucumbers on your eyes? That looks cool. Like hot rocks on your back. Okay, ooh, aromatherapy, that sounds nice. And then we like, yeah, here am I, send me. Or like, who wants to follow the plan? Or like 2/3, 2/3 said yes. We shouted for joy, Job says. Makes me wonder if the third that said no found the right pamphlet. I don't know. But then we came to Earth. Can you imagine if you'd never, ever seen a gym before, had no idea what it was trying to accomplish, and you walk in and you're looking around, totally confused, like, what did these people do wrong? There's a lot of pain in here. There's like groans and grunts and shrieks and what seriously, this is like forced labor. This is the torture chamber. What is going on? What did they do? Because I don't want to do whatever they did. I got to get out of here because there's no cucumbers, and there's no hot rocks, and this is not what I signed up for. And you're just like, no, but look at that guy. He's on this bench and like there's this bar that's crushing him under the load, and you could see he's trying to escape from it. And then there's some sadistic like jailkeeper above him with his hands like just inches away, but he won't help. He's just yelling at him. And it's like, what is wrong here? What did they do? And your guide just says, oh, no, they want to be here. They're paying for this. And you're like, what? And with that guy that's so close, if he pulls it up too fast, the person on the bench is going to be angry. You ever had an overeager spotter? Where it's like, dude, I got this. Give me that vein on my forehead wasn't even popping out yet. I mean, I'm trying to build some muscle, and please let me grow. This is the only time I'll have to do it. And this is what we signed up for. I'm grateful for the occasional day in the spa. And God in his kindness allows us some breaks now and then. But we signed up for the gym, and it's the gym where we find ourselves. And once we accept that, the hardness of life at least has some purpose. And as Viktor Frankl said, in the concentration camps, we can get through any what if we have a powerful enough why. My father-in-law, I sometimes joke with him. I said, Dad, you know you're Job, right? Because he's been through it. When I go meet Job in the spirit world, I'm going to be, in awe. I'll be like, hey, can you sign my scriptures? It's like, I love your book. And he's going to be like, well, but you're here too. You must have gone through hard things. And I'll be feeling really sheepish, like, early morning seminary? I served my mission for 2 years. And then the Sons of Mosiah walked by, 14. I'm like, dang it. I walked to church sometimes when the car was broken, and then the pioneers walked by. They're like, it's like, I got nothing. But if my father-in-law pulls up a chair next to Job, he'll be able to say, oh, I got some stories to swap. My father-in-law has been through it. When his wife passed away in their mid-30s, leaving him a single father with 7 kids, 12 and under. How am I going to do this? When his wife was being rushed to the hospital because of leukemia in one ambulance, and his newborn son was being rushed to the hospital because he had to be born early enough that mom would still be alive to deliver him. And he's like, which ambulance do I follow? And he said as he was driving, Heavenly Father, you don't have to explain yourself, but please tell me that you're there. I don't need a why, but please confirm the who. And that got him through it. It needed to, because years later when his son died, and then years later when he lost his business and moved from the mansion at the top of the hill to the trailer at the bottom of the same hill, when he went to prison for something he didn't do, when he got throat cancer, when his second wife lost her faith and then lost her sanity, I said to him, Dad, did you know Job had 10 kids? And he's like, really? Because my father-in-law has 10 kids, 7 from his first marriage and 3 from his second. And I said, Job had 7 sons and 3 daughters. And my father-in-law was like, wow, that is odd, because he has 7 sons and 3 daughters. And then I couldn't help myself. I said, and did you know that in the book of Job, it says that his daughters were the fairest in all the land? I'm particularly fond of one of them. But Dad, you're going to have stories to share with him. And what's amazing is my father-in-law gets it in the way that Job didn't get until the end of the book. Because my father-in-law sees God as a spotter and doesn't want him to be an overeager one. My father-in-law has said repeatedly, of all the attributes of deity, the one that amazes me most is divine restraint. I'm grateful for a lot of attributes of God. Mercy is big on my list. Grace, knowledge, power. I don't know if I would have added restraint, let alone put it at the top of the list. But for my father-in-law, he said, I don't get mad at God, whatever the latest trial is, because this is what I signed up for. And if this life is the one shot I get as the best opportunity to be stretched and to grow and to become like my parents in heaven, then I think I'd be more mad if my life was easy than since it's been hard. Because if it was easy, I'd be shaking my fist heavenward saying, Heavenly Father, why are you pulling up the bar every time I start to struggle underneath it? You're robbing me of my one opportunity to grow. And man, he's grown. You see, the book of Job follows the creation and fall atonement story arc too. In the first couple chapters is creation stage. For him, it's like, I have all this stuff, but I am practically perfect. And so, of course, I deserve all these blessings. It makes total sense to him. The fall comes when everything goes wrong and his friends come, so-called friends, miserable counselors are ye all, he eventually says to them. But they're saying, okay, sin equals suffering. And we're seeing the suffering, so what's the sin? And they're kind of starting to pry. Now, Job, the irony of the book of Job is he shares the same worldview as his friends. He just disagrees with them because he's seen it from his angle instead of theirs. For them, it was suffering equals sin. They see the suffering, there must be sin. Job was, I know there's no sin, so there should be no suffering. And so for like 30 chapters, he's shaking his fist heavenward, basically trying to sue God for malpractice. Seriously, go reread the book of Job. He's mad and he's calling God out and said, I want to see you in court. I want you to give me the evidence of what I've done wrong to deserve this. And no answer. Until finally, like 38 chapters in, the Lord speaks to him, not from the still small voice, but from the whirlwind. He basically says, well, he does say, gird up thy loins like a man and answer thou me, which is his way of saying, put your big boy pants on, Job. You want to talk? Fine, but I've got some questions. So I'll meet you in court, but I'm going to pepper you with a bunch of questions about creation, about the cosmos, about the universe itself. See how well you do. And for 2 straight chapters, there's like 60 questions, none of which Job can answer, about how God governs the universe. And by the end, he waves his little white flag and says, I have spoken words without understanding. Things too wonderful for me. Because God is basically saying, Job, do you understand how the universe works? And he's like, nope. Guess what? It does, because I know how it works. Now let's get to the real point. Job, do you understand how your little life works? No. I do. Trust me. And the same omniscience behind the workings of the universe is hard at work in your little world. Trust me. And what amazes me about the end of the book of Job is when he gets all of his blessings back, all of his cows and sheep and oxen, new children born into the family, the only thing he never gets from God is an explanation. But this is what we signed up for. I actually, when my wife and I finally got engaged, I read to her after 7 months of proposing on my part. Okay, I'm an acquired taste, baby. But she finally agreed. When I asked my father-in-law for his permission, he just laughed and he said, well, good luck with that. Be patient, he said. She's worth the wait. And he was right on both counts. But when we finally got engaged, I read to her my patriarchal blessing. That was my disclosure document. This is who you're signing up for. The good, the bad. Because there's a line in there that says that trial and tribulation will come. That part's always haunted me because my life was pretty easy growing up. I look at other people's trials and it's like, man, God's throwing hard. He's throwing fastballs. Right on the inside corner, if you're crowding the plate. And then for me, he's like, wiffle balls. Okay, little trial. Okay, little trial. Right here comes. Little. And then there's that line. And I wanted to make sure my wife knew beforehand. I don't know what this is. But if you sign up for this, you're marrying a ticking time bomb. And over the 25 years we've spent together, it's starting to make a little more sense what God had in mind when he told us before that things would be hard, that there'd be fall on the way to atonement. But I wouldn't have it any other way. That's what carves out the depths of the soul to give us space for God to pour in his grace and his love. It's all about expectation. Because here's the thing. Not only did he tell us before about the fall, he told us before about the atonement. He promised us that he would wipe away every tear from every eye. When my wife's mom died when she was 8, she said it was amazing to just be cocooned by the Comforter. And in the instances when our kids have been millimeters from the grave, and it weighs on a mother's heart in harder ways than it does on a father's, I've sometimes said to her, honey, nobody knows better than you that it's going to be okay, come what may. Because you've been through it twice with your mom, with your brother. Nobody knows the resurrection better than you do. Nobody has a greater faith of what's on the other side. You know the promises are real because you've had those confirmed to you in the hardest moments of life. So we got this. No matter what the kids go through, no matter what we face. Because there's this thing, and I'll have to wrap it up here. There's this moment in Elijah's ministry where the widow of Zarephath, wow, it's amazing how the Lord feels about widows and widowers. The widow of Zarephath, the widow of Nain, all through the Old Testament, his most cared for audiences were widows and orphans and strangers. He always makes mention of them. He warns his people, if things are good for you, don't you dare do anything against widows or orphans or strangers. Or I'll let somebody take your life so that your wives know what it feels like to be a widow and your kids know what it feels like to be an orphan. How's that for enforced empathy? There's some serious stuff. But with the widow of Zarephath, Elijah comes. And you know this story. If you'll feed me first with your last handful of meal and your last few drops of oil, trust God. Put me first, and God will continue to multiply that oil to the point that you never run out. Now, as a teacher of scripture, I love teaching that story, but there's a part of me that wishes I could rewrite the script because I'm a little bummed that Elijah told her in advance about the miracle. Because wouldn't it be more epic if he just kind of kept that kind of card close to the vest and didn't say a word and just really tested her faith? And I know that's your last handful, but give me the cake, and just left it there hanging in the air. I mean, remember when she was not gathering sticks? I said she gathered 2 sticks to make the fire. You ever made a 2-stick fire? That's how small the fire is going to be, which lets you know how small the cake's going to be. This is just going to be a morsel. And so you're about to die anyway, whether this is your last meal or yesterday was your last meal. Either way, you got a last meal coming. So maybe at least your last act can be a self-sacrificial one. And mom's looking at him going, are you kidding me? Every act of mine has been self-sacrificial. Do you have any idea who you're talking to? But no, he tells her. And I'm like, spoiler alert. Oh, that you just robbed yourself of the best anticipation. Because can you imagine if she just does it and gives you her last cake? And now she knows, okay, I guess yesterday was the last meal. And this is it, son, for you and me. And then Elijah, with a twinkle in his eye, says, could you make another? Are you kidding me? No. No, this time you can make it for yourself. There's nothing left to use to make one. So just try. And can you imagine the shock and awe of her reaching in and feeling something there at the bottom of the barrel? There's a miracle. And I remember one of the first times I taught it, I was kind of having a little heart-to-heart with God and said, you could have made this better. You could have set this up for a more like dramatic grand finale when the miracle came. But no, you had to tell her in advance. And I remember the Spirit just really sweetly saying, Jared, the final moments of a widow and her son, that's not dramatic enough for you. The least I could do is promise her in advance, if you'll just do this, it's still going to be a gut-wrenching test of faith. But I need you to know beforehand, it'll all be worth it. My friends, I'm grateful that we know in advance all that we signed up for. Yeah, there's that veil thing, but the scriptures part the veil every time we part the page to remind us that, yes, we signed up for the fall, whatever it might bring, but we signed up for the atonement. And Christ told us all about that before. So when the Lion of the tribe of Judah prevailed to open the book with the 7 seals, in premortality, we could replace our tears of worry with tears of joy. Of all the people whose tears he's eager to wipe away, it's yours. It's your children's. Because once when I was driving as a young married husband and early father, I still remember the exact intersection in Provo where I happened to be. I was alone in the car, but thinking about the girl that meant eternity to me, and not picturing her as the 24-year-old I'd married, but as the 8-year-old who just lost her mom. And I just broke down sobbing behind the steering wheel. For a little girl that would go through life with a mom-shaped hole in her heart that can only be filled by the love of God. My dear friends, I love you. I'm probably just a junior member of the Fellowship of Suffering. But will you let me in to learn from you, to feel of your faith, and to be strengthened by your hope? I testify of God, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and a fullness of gospel truth that tells us everything we need to know in advance. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.